What up? What up? What up? What up? How you doing? First, I want to say big shout out to all of you who watched the last show. Probably one of the highest rated, highest viewed shows I've had in a minute. People sharing it and all that, and I realized I struck a nerve. I struck a nerve, letting people know what's really going down. So it's interesting. I got a couple of comments to address the comments. Address the comments. Yeah. Big shout to you, my man. This is what I want y'all to do. I want you to share it. So if I have to make content that's shareable, then I will do it. I thought maybe you wanted to share some of my silliness. Next. Now see, that's an interesting topic, the public school system. Because the public school system is a farce. It's a system set up for you to become a great employee. Why don't you think they ever teach us to learn? Why don't they teach us to start a business? Why isn't that part of the curriculum? Gotta think about that. So, I wanted to go into the bankruptcy. Okay, now if you can recall when I was talking about the birth certificate, I had said that one of the things that triggered the whole birth certificate and its whole use was the fact that we declared, United States had declared itself bankrupt. So we're going to go right into that, man. I got a little article that I had found that talks a little bit about that. Actually kind of helped me with that last show. So let's go ahead and dive right on into that.
You do not understand, but you will.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over. Game over.
So the U.S. government went bankrupt back in June 5th, 1933. It dissolved the sovereign authority of the United States and official capacities of all United States governmental offices and departments. The U.S. federal government exists in name only. With the constitutional Republican form of government dissolved, receivers of bankruptcy adopted democracy as a new form of government. Now, here's what's interesting about democracy. Democracy is defined as being an established socialist/communist order under a new governor for America. Now, the receivers of bankruptcy turn out to be the international bankers via the United Nations, the World Bank, same people we owe this money to as with our lives, which was in the last show, as well as the International Monetary Fund, another bank that we owe our lives to. All offices, as far as United States capacity, officials and departments are operating in de facto status in name only under emergency war powers. Now, what does that mean? So I went and looked up what emergency war powers was, and I found an article called Presidential Emergency Powers, the so-called War Powers Act of 1933. This came out on August 20th, 1996. And it reads, the War Powers Act of 1933 is a name given by some members of the militia and patriot movement to emergency banking legislation passed in 1933, 5 days after President Roosevelt came into office. One, the legislation did not, in fact, have the title attributed to it. It has apparently been so labeled by some because the banking legislation amended the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917 in order to give legal underpinning to President Roosevelt's efforts to cope with the banking crisis. It is alleged by its modern-day critics that by that amendment, the government in effect declared war on the American people and began a reign of unconstitutional rule through presidential emergency powers. Then it goes on to talk about other such incidents of national emergencies. And if you really are paying attention, you'll know that Trump pulled that, trying to do a national emergency to try to get money for the funding of the wall. Smoke and mirrors, in other words. That's basically what it is. People in power abusing their powers, you know. And so I found it interesting to actually even know that the United States has been bankrupt this whole time. We're paying taxes and we have deficits and all this other bullshit that's been going on, but we've been bankrupt the entire time. That was interesting. And then to use us as property, not just black folks, everybody as property to make up for the debt. You're born into debt is crazy. We are a superpower. But how superpower are we if we've been bankrupt since who knows when? How super powerful are we if we're not even owned by members of the United States? You understand what I'm saying? That's what's going to bring me into talking about DC. That's going to be a topic. I'm going to do a little research on that, but I found it interesting that all this time, Washington, D.C. is just a province. It's not a state. It's the capital of all the states, yet it's not a state within itself. But it's interesting what I found out what it was. So we'll talk about that another time. But there's one thing else I want to get into, and it's in this same article that talking about this banking legislation. But it talks about what the dollar actually was. All right, let's dive back into that. So a dollar is a measure of weight defined by the Coinage Act of 1792 and 1900, and it's still in effect today. It equals 24.8 grams of gold or 371.25 grains of silver. Gold and silver were powerful money in the founding of the United States of America. That founding fathers declared only gold and silver coins can be made into money. So if we go back to the birth certificate situation, when this bankruptcy happened and gold and silver was taken away from us and taken out of our banks, we weren't able to pay off the debt as individuals. You dig? You see? Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. If you ever heard of Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, in his book, he actually says that money is a concept. And when I first read that, I didn't understand what he meant by that. I kind of understood, but I didn't fully understand it. Now that I have somewhat of a foundation, now I understand it. So here we are fighting over debt. We actually kill each other and rob each other of pieces of paper that signify that we owe someone what this piece of paper says. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. Again, see, I didn't want to go too far with this. Maybe there'll be a part 2. I don't know. I didn't want to go too far with this because I didn't want to take up too much time. But I did want to connect it to the birth certificate. All right? And how a piece of paper that was supposed to be backed by gold and silver is no longer backed by gold and silver. It's backed by a concept created by a few people. And we fight. And we are bankrupt. And we're indebted. And we do all sorts of things over these little slivers of pieces of paper that don't mean anything. I want y'all to think about that, man. Some more stuff to get you thinking a little bit. I'll be back with some more stuff. Feel free to comment below. You know, I'm sure there's something you might want to say or might want to know. Hey, suggest a topic. I don't care. I think I'm on to something here, man, and I'm feeling proud of myself. Y'all be good. I'll see y'all later.
This concludes the broadcast from World Control.
Let's pretend like this never happened.
Look, I don't like having to trust anyone because I'm always disappointed. But just once, I'd like to know that I could actually trust someone. That for at least one person, everything was...